All right, I think we'll get started here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our September How to Price Your Home webinar. I've got Alan with me as well, and we're going to walk through how to price your home and sell yourself for maximum value. So we'll do a couple of quick introductions, both about Bōde and then also about ourselves. So Alan, why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Brilliant. Thanks, Jeff. So I'm Alan Kelly. I'm one of the founders and the Chief Revenue Officer here at Bōde. For those who don't know Bōde, Bōde's a new company. We've been around for 2 years, and we're helping people buy and sell homes without a realtor and control the entire process themselves from start to finish and every part of it, and save a ton of money in commissions. So that's what we do. My background is not actually in real estate. It's much more in tech, and I've spent a lot of time and many years thinking about pricing in lots of different industries. So excited to talk to you guys today a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I'm Jeff, so I'm a founder of Bōde and Vice President of Sales. I have a bit of a real estate background, so I started in real estate 14 years ago, I guess now. So straight out of university, became licensed in real estate and started doing commercial real estate. Very quickly learned that commercial real estate was not my forte, moved into residential, and since that time, I've been involved in a building company, building inner city homes in Altadore and Elbow Park in Calgary. Currently part of a land development group that is developing land in Springbank, and then of course my main role is working with Bōde. During my time in the real estate industry, I grew pretty frustrated with the industry and its lack of evolution. A lot of times I hear from people that industry just hasn't evolved at all, and they're very frustrated when they tell me that. And I kind of counter argue that the industry has evolved quite a bit, but it's evolved to the benefit of agents and not to the benefits of homeowners and potential homeowners. So that's why I'm really excited to be part of Bōde. All right. So yeah, we'll jump in, and I'll let Alan take it away here and just discuss kind of methodologies and theory behind why it's very important to set an accurate list price.
Yeah, thanks a million, Jeff. I'm just going to take the first few slides here and then pass back to Jeff. But Jeff asked the question, why is it so important to set an accurate list price? And one really surprising statistic that I don't think many people know about is that only 50% of homes that are listed with realtors on realtor.ca actually sell. So the other 50% fail to sell. And I think that's a very surprising number for most people. I think if you were to ask most people what percentage of homes do you think sell on realtor.ca, they'd probably guess somewhere between 80 to 90%. But that's simply not the case when you look at the data. The other part of this is you might think, well, this must differ massively in different cities around Canada, but it's amazingly consistent in every city. So even in hot markets like Vancouver and Toronto, still 50% of homes fail to sell. In Calgary and Edmonton, far less hot markets than Vancouver and Toronto, it's the exact same number. 50% of homes listed on realtor.ca fail to sell. So this is really critical information that realtors typically wouldn't tell you when you're listing a home with them. But I think it's really important to know when you're thinking about pricing your own home, because the number one reason for a home not selling is price. And what we have here on the next slide, if you can just move one forward, Jeff, are how overpricing actually leads to underselling. So it's so critical to set the right list price, because that sets you off on the right foot, attracts the right number of buyers, and it allows you to eventually get an offer that you're happy with and that's close to market value. But here's how it typically goes especially for that 50% of people who fail to sell. This is typically what it looks like. So they start off by setting a high list price. They're at number 1. And they set it high because they're hoping to attract a high offer. They think if I set my price high, hopefully that'll attract a high offer. And maybe if I have to negotiate, I can come down on my price a little bit. But typically what happens is they set it high like that, and they set it above their market value, and they wait and wait, but no offers come in. So they end up, reducing their price a little bit, wait a bit longer, still no offers, reduce it a little bit more, wait, reduce it a little bit more, wait again. And throughout this entire time that they're listed, they're actually helping their neighbors to sell, because they're making their neighbors' homes look relatively more attractive, right? Because every buyer out there is taking a look at what homes are available in that community, and they're looking at this person's house and saying, wow, that's overpriced, and I can get this other one for far less. So it's a funny irony that in pricing your home high, you're actually helping your neighbors out. So eventually, after a lot of price decreases, you might get down where you see 5 and 6 there, where you're about at market value. And typically here, you would expect a bunch of offers to start coming in. But one of the first things a buyer asks when they go to see a home is they ask how long it's been on the market. And if you've been on the market for a long time, that kind of spooks buyers a little bit. They wonder, well, why has no one else bought this property yet? It must be bad value for money at the current list price. So it can be the case that you have to get a little bit below market value before you actually find an offer. And again, this is quite counterintuitive to people. A lot of what they've heard when it comes to negotiation is you need to start high and you need to meet in the middle. But when it comes to selling your home, you actually want to try and start about as close to market value as you can. And if you can start close to market value, what happens is you'll get a lot of interested buyers very quickly at the beginning. And if things work out well, you might even have competing offers that helps you then achieve a price that's, towards the top end of the range of market value. Or if you can drive enough interest, you might even end up with an offer that's above market value. So that's a quick summary of how overpricing your home leads to bad results. On the next slide, again, going back to this point, another surprising statistic. And this is true across the entire country as well. So the average sold price to list price ratio is 97%. And it always stays the same. It's the same in Vancouver, it's the same in Toronto, it's the same in Calgary, it's the same in Edmonton. And the reason for this is by the time a home sells, its list prices typically come down to about that kind of market range level. So on average, buyers are really only getting a 3% discount from the ultimate list price. So what this tells us is, in a way, it's buyers typically don't make low ball offers. So if you start out with a really high list price, we often have people ask us, well, won't someone just make me, if my list price is too high, won't someone just make me a low ball offer and I'll still get an offer and still get my home sold? And typically that's not what happens. And the big reason for that is if a buyer is working with two reasons. If a buyer is working with a realtor, that realtor is going to discourage them from putting in a low ball offer. They're worried about their reputation, and they're worried about offending the seller, and they're worried that that low ball offer just won't go anywhere. So that's reason number one for buyers who are working with realtors. And then for buyers who aren't working with realtors, again, they're worried about offending the seller. Now, it's more common for a buyer who's not working with a realtor to submit a low ball offer, but they're still worried about offending the seller. So they typically don't put in many low ball offers either. Again, we're speaking in averages here. Of course, there will be some homes that sell for above list price, some homes that sell for way below list price, and there are some buyers who put in very low offers. But on average, most buyers are hesitant to do that. So typically, you've got to get your list price kind of within 3% of market value in order to start receiving offers and get your home sold. Anything else to add to that, Jeff? Okay. So what are the major factors to think about in terms of your home's value? On this next slide, we talk about some of the key things. And it's really, in thinking about what your home's worth today, if you just go back one slide, Jeff, if you're thinking about what your home's worth today, the way to think about it is, well, your home's worth what a serious buyer is willing to pay for it. And how do buyers decide what they're willing to pay? Well, they do the exact same things that you did last time you were buying a home, which is you compare it to all the other homes that are available for sale right now. And they also take a look at other homes that have recently sold. And they're trying to figure out what is good value for money. So effectively, buying a home is a massive comparison shopping exercise. So whatever's on the market right now, they're taking a look to see, well, I could buy this one or I could buy that one. This one seems better value at the current price that it's listed at. And again, typically buyers are thinking that they're not going to be able to buy the home for a massive discount off the list price. So they're looking at your list price and making an evaluation of how good value for money is this home versus this other home that's just down the street. And again, as I alluded to, if you think back to the last time you bought a home, that's exactly what you did. You know, you would have taken a look around the neighborhood, you would have seen what's for sale, you would have compared all of those homes to each other, figured out which one was the best value for money for you, for what you're looking for, and made a decision based on that. So you really have to get into the mindset of a buyer. The other thing to think about are the big things that determine your home's value. Again, people often, I think, get some of this the wrong way around. But in order of importance, the most important factors are location, so where your home is, you know, what street it's on and what community, what city, of course. Then it's the type and style. So is it a detached home, an apartment, semi-detached home, and the style. So is it a two-story? Is it a bungalow? That's obviously very important. Different kinds of buyers for different home styles. Then the next most important criteria is size. So how big is the home? How many bedrooms is a really important factor. Those are really the three biggest things, and that makes up the vast majority of your home's value. And then there's some other things that affect your home's value, but in a way that kind of more affect the saleability of your home. So just how much more appealing is it to buyers than other similar homes nearby? And that's condition and amenities, or amenities, depending where you're from. But this is, you know, is your home in immaculate condition? Has it been freshly painted? Does it present really well? Is it nearby, you know, very close to a park that's helpful? Or does it have a double detached garage? All of those kinds of things are making a difference at the margin, but don't make up the majority of your home's value. Anything else to add to that, Jeff?
Nope. Sorry, I'll just apologize for jumping around screens. It's probably not clear to everyone on the call, but Alan and I are actually sitting in the same room. So I was worried that we were getting a bit of an echo, so I was just jumping around. Yeah, no, I think you outlined that really well, Alan. I think, I think about condition and amenities, and often during my time selling real estate, sellers really thought that those things would really impact the value of their home. Things like the last home that I renovated, I added in-floor heat in the ensuite. Something I loved. And, I think like in-floor heat and air conditioning units, those are things that a buyer might really appreciate, but it's not necessary. They're not going to assign a value to that. They're not going to look at your home and say, oh, this one has air conditioning, I'm going to pay $4,500 more because of that. What it will do is sway a buyer towards your home over the competition. So as you said, location, type, and style and size are really the things that determine home value. And of course, you mentioned that across streets at the lowest level, are you on a busy street? Are you on a cul-de-sac? Across communities, cities, and when you look at on a city level, there's a reason that condos in downtown Tribeca, New York, are $2,500 a square foot, and downtown Calgary is $400 a square foot. So location is definitely the biggest factor here. This slide, we're just walking through, the different opinions of value. So what we like to say is that an appraiser, who is a totally independent third party that has a job of appraising a home, really has the most accurate view of what market value is. Of course, buyers want to pay as little as possible, as all buyers do in any marketplace. And then a seller often has a higher opinion of value than what market value is. And that's not really to be stigmatized, I find. I think that it's an inherent bias. And as Alan just mentioned, at the time that you bought your home, you clearly valued it more than anyone else in the market. And so, fast forward to the average, say 5 years later, when you go to sell that home, it's only natural that you would put a higher value on it than maybe the market does. So just want to talk about, it was great. Alan took us through kind of all the strategy and methodologies and theory behind pricing. And now what I want to do is kind of jump into pricing methodology. So, There's really three that I want to talk about today. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. The one question that always comes up at the end of these webinars that we host is, well, what about tax assessed value? So we don't really talk about tax assessed value in this webinar, but it is, again, another point of data that you can use to help triangulate an accurate listing price for your home. So, I think everyone's clear about, city and municipality tax assessment. So like I said, not going to dive into that, but I do want to talk about three other data sets. So the first one being the HPI, or Home Price Index. Recently sold listings, which during my time selling real estate was the one thing that I spent the most time on, or put the most weighting on when pricing a home. And then of course, you want to look at the active listings as well. What can a buyer purchase in the market at this given time? So this is your current competition. So the first one I want to talk about is the Canadian Real Estate Association Home Price Index. This is really easy to find. If you just Google that exact heading, CREA HPI Index, you'll be able to get a spreadsheet, download it. There's two different forms. There's one seasonally adjusted and one seasonally unadjusted. They really don't vary that much, so I don't think it matters which one you choose. But what the index is a data set that incorporates about 16 years of data. So on January 1st, 2005, the Canadian Real Estate Association said, okay, we're going to track these 65 local markets across Canada. And every single month, we're going to publish data for those markets. So on that date, January 2005, they said every market is assigned an index of 100. So in theory, if you had a market that had an average home price of 500,000, if 3 years down the road that home was valued at 600,000, you'd expect to see that home price index move from 100 to 120. So it's a very sophisticated statistical model, and it determines what a benchmark or typical home might be valued at. What's really nice about it too is it not only does it break down Canada by the 65 local markets, but it also breaks down property type. So if you want to look at a HPI for an apartment, attached or detached home, you can find that within the spreadsheet. So this is just a quick example about how you might choose to apply the CREA HPI index. This was a home that I purchased in Calgary about a little over 10 years ago, I guess. And to be honest, when I bought and sold this, I wasn't, I definitely didn't apply the HPI index, but I bought it in May 2011 for $610,000, and I sold it last year in March 2020 for $740,000. So that's an increase of about 22%. And if you look at it, I did this all in hindsight after selling the property. It was a home that I was planning to tear down and build on. So the HPI had increased 21.8%. And if I apply that number to 610, it actually got very close to the number that I sold it at. It was within $3,000. Again, this was all hindsight, but it is a good example of how the application of the index can actually be quite accurate. Again, as I said, with the other, kind of tools that you might use, I would never use any of these in solidarity. I would always use these tools to kind of triangulate your information. This is an example of what the HPI index might look like on a graph. So here you can see this. We've looked at attached properties in this scenario for the city of Calgary. You can see, and there's reason for that, which we'll get to. We can see this big spike of on the index, which is charted on the right side of the graph here, and also on the benchmark price, which is charted on the left side of this chart. And here you can see, kind of the beginning of 2008. We had very high energy prices. A barrel of WTI at this point was probably $140. And then, of course, we all know what happened in 08, 09 with the financial crisis. We saw this really steep decline. And we kind of built back again to another peak. I think it was July 2014, where we saw this, it was a crazy market again. Everything was selling with competing offers and sight unseen, much like we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months. Fast forward again, we had this kind of gradual decline in Calgary, and this really looks quite similar across detached and attached properties. I would just say on the apartment side, this was even more pronounced. That's another topic where, buying habits really changed as a result of the pandemic. You can see this little blip here, just about March and April of last year. And of course, that was the beginning of the pandemic. That was listings fell off a cliff, sales fell off a cliff. We were down a huge amount. And everyone was just kind of stunned about what was happening, and very few properties were transacting.
Maybe I'll just jump in quickly there, Jeff, just to say we make that HPI data available on our website. So you can look this information up for any city and detached, attached apartments, whatever you like. You can find all of that available on our blog. So if you go to the blog section of our website, you can see all of these charts and simply find out what the HPI index was when you bought and now, and do that calculation that Jeff's talking about. Oh, and one other thing I'll quickly mention is, I think we didn't mention at the start, but feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A section of the browser here. Any questions you have at all, feel free to get them in there, and we'll do our best to get to all of them during the session.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Alan. So the next tool, we've covered Create HPI. The next tool I want to talk about is the CMA, or Comparative Market Analysis. This is the thing that you will see on bus benches. Agents will advertise, call for your free CMA. And basically what a CMA is it's a method of property valuation used to value residential properties, and it provides a range. So primarily what it does is look at sold properties, what similar homes have sold for in the area, and it provides a range of value. So if you had a range between 600 and 700,000, that will help a seller set a listing price for their property. So next, I want to jump into how you can kind of complete your own comparative market analysis. So we give all of our users free access to data so that they can do exactly that. And so I'm just going to jump out of this slide deck and into a new presentation. We'll just have a look at a browser. And we're going to use an example from someone who provided their address as part of who's on the call today. And that way it'll kind of provide a little bit of context as we look at these tools. So the first screen that we're looking at is simply obviously Google Street View. So we can see that the address provided was 653 26th Avenue Northwest. We know that it's a recently new build because the last time the little Google car drove by, it was under construction. So we know that this semi-detached home is located in the community of Mount Pleasant in Calgary. And I just want to show you how you can access our data. So if you go to our website, this data is simply behind a login. So for regulatory reasons, we simply require that someone sign up with an email address. As soon as you have an account, all of this data is really at your fingertips. And this is the information that has been gatekept for so long by real estate agents. So the first thing I want to show you is a tool called Market Data. So if you go up to the Sold Data tab in the top navigation and click on Market Data, you can then look across province. So here we've selected Alberta. Of course, we do have data for the Greater Vancouver region, as well as we are functioning in Vancouver now. Here we've selected Calgary and a 1 year. We'll choose a 2-year date range. We're looking at these next set of filters are optional, so you don't need to have them in there. But if you want to drill down to community level, and if you want to drill down even by price or year built, beds, baths, you can do that, and also by property type. So here we're looking at detached homes and attached homes. One thing I'd always recommend is that if you are looking at data for a semi-detached property, I would still look at detached because they're so close, and because a lot of the attached will also include townhouses. I would include detached as part of your due diligence. So you can simply hit apply filters, and what's happening here is we're generating a graph for this exact community and for over 2 years. So here you can select the time frame. We can see the number of sales. So as we'd expect, 2016 was a little bit lower. 2017, the community of Mount Pleasant saw 68 sales. 18 and 19 was kind of low, and then we saw this spike in 2020. So this is the market data tool. Another tool that we offer, which I'll show you on this next tab, is sold data. So here, there's really 2 ways that you can use this tool. The first is by entering address. So here, I've just started typing in the subject property, which we know is 653 26th Avenue Northwest. I can select here, and now I can see, I actually get the sold history. So we can see here that the property was last listed and sold April 23rd, 2015. We can see the listed price was $949 and the sold price was $935 for a 98% sold to list price ratio, which is very close to what Alan had mentioned, is kind of the average sold to list price ratio. So this gives me good information on the subject property, but what I really want to know is more information on the community. So if you use the second aspect of this tool, we can again select the province, the city, the community of Mount Pleasant, and a sold period. And when you hit apply, you're going to see a map like this. And now you can go through all the sold comparables over the last 6 months. Again, there's that magic number, 97%. And you can go, and this is really the start of your comparative market analysis. So looking at what similar homes have sold for in the last 6 months. Of course, I'll get to this in a moment, but we help you with this process. So, you have all of this information at your fingertips, but in a moment, I'll show you how we actually help guide you with a really objective view of what's happening in the market. So in terms of listing your home, jumping over here, it's really quite easy. Again, using the same example, Google will auto-predict the address that you are looking to list. So here it is. We're 653 26th Avenue Northwest. You simply click Get Started, and when you get into this listing flow. So some of this will look a little bit different because my account is a little different from the user account, but we walk you through all of the steps required to list your home. So the first thing we do is ask that you make sure that this little blue dot is accurate on the location of the home. That's all automatic. We find out who owns the property. So if you have another title holder, which is quite common, maybe you have a partner or spouse that's on title, you simply click here and that will add their information and get them to approve the listing as it's created. So I won't go through all of this in detail. That's a separate webinar, but what I will say is this is really easy. Most people get through this process kind of in 10 to 15 minutes, and we help with that as well. Of course, we're happy to do it on our users' behalf if they like. The one thing that does take a little bit of time is the photos and measurements. So we don't require professional photos, but we do pay for them, and we often insist on them because photos are a really, really important aspect of marketing your property. So this takes 2, maybe 3 days to arrange for a professional photographer to come out to your house, as mentioned, at our cost, and also a professional measurement company to come and measure your property. So what the measurement company does is really take responsibility for making sure that the measurements that we are presenting on Realtor.ca and on Bōde have been done to a certain provincial standard. So if you want to be on the market for, say, a weekend, I would say just start this process kind of Monday, Tuesday of that week, and usually we can turn these things around. The one thing that, as mentioned, does take time is just getting these appointments scheduled. So part of the reason our users can get through this information so quickly is as soon as you start that listing process, so as soon as you enter your address and say get started, you haven't submitted it yet, but you started the listing process, we send you a bunch of information. So we have a big team of customer support and customer success. And as soon as that process is started, the first thing that we will send you is any previous MLS history. So again, using the subject property, we will send you this document that really has a lot of information in it that will help you navigate through this process. You know, you might get to this process and say, oh man, I can't remember if I have a flat roll membrane roof or asphalt shingles. You know, 80% of the housing is probably going to be asphalt shingles, but you might not know. And here you can see that that's highlighted right down here. You know, maybe you want to, I won't say plagiarize, but maybe you want to borrow brilliance from the past public remarks. So you can really get some good ideas from here. Again, we can see this property sold April 2015 for $935,000. Scrolling down, we can even see any other sales history. Of course, this first one was way back in 1980 when likely the bungalow or the land transacted. And you can even see all the photos that were used. Knowing that this was a brand new home, I suspect all these photos are staging, which could help as well, right? You might be looking for inspiration about how to make your home appeal to a large subset of buyers. And looking back on photos that were professionally done could help with that process. So this is the first set of information we'll send out to all of our listing starts. The next thing that we do is send you an objective view of what's happening in the market. So here you'll receive an email from our customer success team, and it's going to show you exactly what's happening in the market, and it's an objective view. There's nothing cherry picked, and we actually provide you all the criteria that we chose as part of this data. So here we've looked at semi-detached properties. The subject property, as we saw, was built in 2015. So our subset of data is built between 2013 and 2016. All of these homes have double detached garages and similar square footage. So I think the subject property was about 2,000 square feet above grade. So here we're looking at anything between 1,850 and 2,150 square feet above grade. And now you can see in the past, we know the subject property is here on about 26th Avenue. And you can see all of the sales comparables, and then of course also your active competition. So in this case, there's only one active listing. It's this one here for 820. You know, closer to the park maybe, but otherwise all of these homes are, I think, within a 500-meter radius of one another. Of course, the one that really stands out here is, I think this is the adjacent unit to the subject property. So you don't always get this lucky, of course, but if we click into this, now we can see that the adjacent property sold for $887 just about, what was that? About 6 weeks ago. So July 30th, 2021. And we can click through all the photos, see how the adjacent property was staged. And this is going to set a real, yeah, they've done a great job on this one. Very funky. Everyone loves a good wallpaper in the powder room. So this one's sold for $887. Whether you're selling to an unrepresented buyer or a buyer with representation, this is going to set a very strong precedent. You know, if you put yourself in a buyer's shoes, looking at this, unless there's, you know, substantial upgrades, maybe a different type of basement development, or, you know, substantial upgrades from when the home was built in 2015, this $887 price point is probably something that most buyers are going to point to as appropriate value for the adjacent listing. So just jumping back, as we went through, you can access all the data for free just using the sold data tab at the top of our website. And just to summarize, I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions if we have any at the end. So as Alan went through, you know, overpricing is the main reason for not selling. You know, your home is in a marketplace, and really when you overprice to begin with, it does hurt your chances of selling going forward. And you know, home buying is a massive comparison shopping exercise, and your home is really worth what a buyer is willing to pay for it. And then, of course, just summarizing the 3 data sources that you might choose to use for triangulating your home value: the home price index, the active competition, and recently sold listings. So if anyone at the end of this call, we're going to offer everyone on the call an opportunity to book a short time with me to go through any questions you might have. And even if that's just to kind of navigate that HPI index, I have those spreadsheets, and I'm happy to walk anyone through that. So really, what the point we want to get across is that we give you everything you need to set the perfect list price. So yeah, as promised, at the end of this webinar, our team's going to send out two things. One will be a Calendly link, which gives everyone on the call access to my schedule so that they can schedule a call with me in regards to pricing. And then we'll also send out the ultimate guide to pricing your home, which is an ebook. It's a PDF that we've put together, and it goes over most of the topics that we went through today, but also gets into greater detail. So with that, I think we'll just open it up for any questions that might have come in.
Brilliant, Jeff. I've got a whole bunch of questions here for you, and I think most of them are going to be for you rather than for me. So let me just start going through them here. First one, you talked about 3 methods to use to price your home. Are any of them more or less important than the others?
Yeah, I would definitely put most weight, and I think most buyers would put most weight on the comparable solds, right? Because you might have someone we think it's really important to look at the active competition, but you might have someone on the market, and we see these listings all the time, right? They're just, what we say is optimistic. The less polite way to say that is they're just out to lunch, right? So, you don't just want to use active competition. I would put the greatest emphasis on sold listings. HPI has been really accurate over the last, looking at a lot of examples over the last few years. Tax assessed values have been, some years I'd say tax assessed values are really good, and some years it's really good for the suburbs. Some years it's really accurate for downtown. But in general, the sold listings that are recent is the thing to focus on most.
Awesome. Next question here. It says, so your suggestion would be to price at market value and not above market value. Would you ever suggest pricing slightly below market value?
Yeah, so this is actually a tactic that a lot of agents use. We don't see it super often in Calgary and Alberta, but it's a tactic that's used a lot in really hot markets like Vancouver and Toronto. And just coming back to our suggestion to price at market value, we understand that this is not a perfect science, right? You just want to try to get as close as possible because that will allow you to stick as close as possible to your list price without going through a series of reductions. So the tactic you mentioned about coming under value, I happen to know one person who was involved in this tactic sitting in the room with me just a few months ago. A property went on the market, and as soon as it came to market, I walked into the office. Of course, I'm talking about Alan, and I said, I think you should look at this home. It will sell today. And it happened to be a neighboring property to where I live, and I said, they are using this exact tactic. They're coming in low with the idea that they want an absolute sale by end of today, likely without conditions, not necessarily without conditions. And they know that by pricing at this price, they're going to have multiple offers. I think they ended up with 7 or 8. Of course, it did sell on that day. The seller, in addition to pricing low, also said, we will not be reviewing offers on day one. We're going to look at them Sunday at 7 p.m. So I think that I would actually consider using that if the market environment was appropriate. I would have used that tactic in April of this year or May of this year when things were very hot, very crazy. I'd be a little hesitant to do it now. In Vancouver, I'd feel quite comfortable. We're starting to see a little bit of a slowdown there, but yeah, it's all market dependent. Certainly in a very, very strong buyer's market, I would say never use that tactic.
Yeah, that's an interesting example. All right. But what's interesting about that one, I think, is that home that you were talking about there that I was looking at buying, Jeff, wasn't just priced a little bit below market value, it was priced, $200,000 below market value, and ultimately ended up selling for, I think, more than $200,000 more than its list price. But so that's quite an extreme example, but it worked very well for that seller because, as you say, they generated a ton of offers really quickly, and got themselves a very competitive bidding situation. People knowing that they were competing against a lot of other bids and trying to put in the highest price that they thought was fair for them. Unfortunately, I didn't end up buying that home. We missed out on it, but I think it's interesting to think about going a little bit below market value. It kind of depends on having that market value range about right, because if you go just a tiny bit below it, you're unlikely to kind of generate that frenzy of bidders that Jeff was talking about. So sometimes it's easier to either go a lot below it, so you're generating a lot of interest on day one, or actually, if you're not going to do that, it's best to kind of stick to about what you think the market value is. So yeah, I think that's good suggestions there.
Yeah, I think you did all your research on that home, the home we're talking about, and I think in that example, it worked out really well for the seller because we looked in detail at the data, and the reality is that buyer, in our opinion, simply overpaid. And so it was to the benefit of the seller. They created this frenzy. They had a 2-day window to sell, and I think it sold for not crazy, but probably $65,000, $75,000 over what the market value would have been if they had simply priced at that value. So it doesn't always work. It is a risk, but certainly it is a tactic that we see.
Great. Next question here. If I'd like to get an appraisal, do you have appraisers that you would recommend?
Yeah, definitely. So one aspect of our business is called the Pro Marketplace, which is really all the professional support that you need to sell. So in the Pro Marketplace, we have lawyers, photographers, measurement technicians, drywallers, stagers, and of course appraisers as well. The reason I like having an appraisal is really twofold. So the first one is obviously it's going to help you set your list price, which is now a fourth thing that will help you determine list price, and I would argue one of the most valuable of all those things. So helping to set your list price, an appraisal will cost maybe $250, $300. In the past, we've offered to split that cost with our sellers because we do think it is such high value. The other thing that I really like about, as a seller, having an appraisal report on hand is how much it can benefit you through the negotiating process. So you're on the market, say you're on the market for $500,000, and you know that there's an interested party, and they're suggesting that they want to offer $425. Well, the first thing you can do is say, thanks for the offer. I just want to present you with this document. This is not a biased report. This is a third-party independent report of the property value. And the reason I say it's not biased is because when you get a property value from a real estate agent, it's often biased by their incentives. Real estate agents are not trained to provide a property valuation in the way that an appraiser is. So an appraiser is a third party licensed. So they have their own division of licensing, and they're also trained in a much more robust way than a real estate agent might be in providing evaluations. So again, you go to that party, you say, I just want to present you with this report. It was completed 6 weeks ago, and it suggests that the market value is actually $485,000, and it's based on this property that sold just down the street, this one that's a block away, and now you can say, okay, let's actually dig into that. And of course, we have that data. We can provide that data and say, let's look at that property that's just down the street. Well, how does it compare to the subject? And now you can look at, little things. You can really start drilling in to square footage. Was it within plus minus 50 square feet? Did it have laminate countertops or stone? Was the garage insulated or not? Really getting down to the details, and then you can apply a metric to each of those things. So if one had a developed basement and the other one didn't, well, depending on how it's developed, on average, with most kind of properties, you might assign a value of 20,000 to that development. So yeah, certainly recommend our sellers get appraisals wherever there's interest to get one. And it's when you compare that $300 cost of an appraisal to the often $12,000, $14,000, $16,000 cost of hiring an agent, I think it's money very well spent, and it will certainly help you through the negotiating process.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jeff. And maybe I'll just add on to that. For people who are interested in getting an appraisal, as Jeff mentioned, you can find appraisers in our pro marketplace. And what we've done is we've put the highest rated appraisers in each city into the pro marketplace. So you have a choice of 2 or 3 of the top rated appraisers, and you can see who they are for your particular city. So if you're in Calgary or Edmonton or Vancouver, you can see which ones are servicing that area. Next question. So question here is from Rose. How do you feel about selling a condo in today's market?
Rose, you're going to hate my answer. Condo sales have been very difficult in the last little while. It's a bit of a race to the bottom. And what's interesting in condo sales is that it's very easy to find really similar comparables, if not the exact same floor plan. So, I should preface that by saying primarily I'm talking about the Alberta market on this. So Vancouver, if your subject property, Rose, is in Vancouver, I'd kind of move that to the side. I know most of our registrants today are from Alberta, but if you're one of the registrants from Vancouver, let's arrange a call to talk in more detail. The reason condo sales have struggled is a myriad of factors. The first, of course, is just a lot of supply. We saw a ton of supply come to market over the last few years, and that will correct itself, because what's happening is developers are no longer, they're still building, there's cranes all over the city, Edmonton and Calgary. But what they're building now is apartments, so purpose-built rentals. And so that supply will start to come down, but right now there's a lot of supply. The other factor that's really hurting the condo market is the global pandemic. If you look at what has happened since the pandemic started, I often say the reason you would live in, it's a somewhat negative term, but like a box in the sky. The reason that you would live on the 35th floor of a high rise is because you're willing to sacrifice your space, your living space, because of everything that is offered around you. You might have a boutique fitness studio just a block away. You might have a Starbucks in the basement, or like a organic grocer like Sunterra, or one of these on the main floor, right? So you sacrifice the space that you live in for all of the amenities that you enjoy by living in this small apartment. Now, as soon as the pandemic hit, elevators became a big issue. People who are living in high rises were waiting for elevators, which sometimes carried 10, 12 people, now can only carry 2. And all of those things that you enjoyed are kind of closed or have been. And of course, we're heading into some more restrictions next week. But you look at that apartment, and maybe it's a 2-bed, 2-bath in Calgary, let's say $450,000. What those people kind of realized in the midst of the pandemic is that if you went out to, let's say, Airdrie, Cochrane, High River, Okotoks, even just the more suburban areas like the southeast of Calgary, that $450,000 might get you a relatively new home with a double attached garage and a backyard and a home office and a home gym. So those things which have become very important to people during the pandemic. So would love to chat with you, Rose, directly about your particular subject property. But in general, it's been a tough time for our sellers that are selling apartment condos.
Brilliant. And Rose, Jeff will be available if you want to book some time with them to talk about your particular situation there. Next question's from James. He's asking, when I'm listing with Bōde, is there someone who can help if I have a question about the kind of construction type my home is? And is there someone who can help me throughout my listing period?
Yeah, we have a really big team of customer support and customer success. You can book, you can chat with us online, you can text us, you can email us, you can arrange calls. There's really no limit to the amount of support that we can provide. So yeah, some of these questions, again, especially if you haven't received the previous MLS sheet, maybe your home hasn't been on the market before. Yeah, construction type, 98% of the times in Alberta is wood frame. Of course, you might have a construction type of concrete if you're in a high-rise building, or the less common ones would be something like log home or insulated concrete form or ICF. But yeah, we're happy to walk you through any of those questions, and we have a great response time, so you won't be left hanging. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. And as we said, if you want to book a call simply to help go through your listing flow, we can also do that.
Brilliant. Next question here from Alice. She's asking, if I have a tenant in my property, will this impact my ability to sell it? I'm worried about not being able to sell with my tenant in place.
Okay, great question. This all relates to the RTA, or Residential Tenancies Act. Sorry, I think it was Alice. Alice, I have the act is really difficult to decipher and it's really long, but I have a summary of the entire act that I can provide to you. So with tenants, the first thing you want to know is it a fixed term lease? So does it expire at a certain date? Or is it month to month? Because that's going to really dictate how much notice you need to provide to your tenant. If it's a month to month, I think they are required 90 days notice. If it's a fixed term lease, let's say they are in a lease until December 31st, with few exceptions, you actually can't sell that property until that lease expires. Those exceptions being the house is being torn down, one of your family members is moving in. So that's the first step. Like I said, I have this really good summary of the RTA that I can send out. Now that's kind of the legal side. In practice, what you want, ideally, what you want to do is have a really warm relationship with your tenant and get them on side to this process. Because if your tenant doesn't want to leave and doesn't want this home to sell, they can make it very difficult for you. So, what I've seen some landlords do is say, look, I want/need to sell this property. I really want to get it on the market. How can we work together to make sure that, that I'll have the most chances of success doing that? We've seen some landlords that will say, I will pay your last month's rent on this property and your first month's rent at the other one. And I think that's a very generous offer. You might consider something like that. The other thing to keep in mind is showings. Per the RTA, your tenants are required to have 24 hours notice for showings. Now, in practice, again, we don't see this in industry practice. You would technically be, if I read the law correctly, you would technically be required to post that notice on the door 24 hours before. Of course, that doesn't happen. We use text and email to serve these notices. So it really comes down to the relationship with your tenant.
Fantastic. Jeff, another question here. This one's just come in. It's about condos again. It says, I'm in Edmonton and need to sell my condo. I don't have the luxury of waiting or hanging on to it. Are there any tips you have that would help me compete against all the other condo listings? New paint, staging, etc.
So, I mean, in context of this webinar, price is the biggest, right? And with condos, not only, as I mentioned, can you usually find a very comparable unit in your exact building, but you can also use price per square footage. Of course, I wouldn't compare a 1 and a 2 bedroom. I would find, whatever your bedroom configuration is, start to drill down that data. I'm happy to help on that process of price per square footage. And if you don't have the luxury of waiting, what's happening in that market where there's a lot of supply and very few buyers is that, a lot of the buyers are looking for the deals, right? I haven't sold real estate in the conventional manner for a long time, but when I look back at, some of our slower markets, that is the process that we see, is that, a buyer might call and say, hey, are you motivated? No? Okay, I'm moving on, right? And what they're saying is, hey, can I get a deal? So that's the price aspect. Painting, staging, I always advocate for paint, especially if you have a bit of a darker or let's just call it unique purple pink paint. Best return on investment, especially if you have a weekend off and can do that work on your own. There's so many resources to how to. Painting's easy, right? Rolling, it's just that cutting in at the ceiling and wall part. Spend the 15 minutes watching a YouTube video. It's a really simple process. You'll save a ton of money, and I always think that you get a really good return on investment from paint. It's not expensive. Happy to share, my paint choices. It's like classic gray, Oxford white, all these Benjamin Moore paints that I've used that are just the most widely accepted by the market and enjoyed and again, you can Google that stuff as well. Staging, I would say staging is a bit of a function of what else is on the market. So photographs are so important with marketing a property that I'm a big believer in staging. I have used it in past homes that I've sold. And what it does is A, it gets people to book the showing, and B, it kind of helps people to envision a space when they arrive. So huge advocate of staging.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And then last question we have time for here, 1 minute left. The question is, I'd love to talk about my list price with someone at Bōde. Can you tell me again how I do that?
Yeah, you bet. So I don't know if it'll be immediately following, but shortly following this call, our team's going to send out a link. Simply follow it'll be a Calendly link to my schedule, and we can book that anytime. So yeah, looking forward to that for whomever asked the question.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all we have time for here today. So from my side, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's joined, and thanks to Jeff for hosting such an interesting webinar. And if anyone wants to book one of those sessions with Jeff, keep an eye out for that email that's coming, and also keep an eye out for that guide coming that will give you all the tips and all the information we covered here on how to set the perfect list price for your home. Over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. Thanks so much everyone for joining, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.